everybody. My name is Dan Clark, and today I would like to discuss A Day That Will Live in Infamy, a speech given by Franklin D. Roosevelt. Is our audience for the night? A Day That Will Live in Infamy by Franklin D. Roosevelt has been greatly considered one of the greatest speeches of the 20th century, especially when you consider how it was written, why it was spoken, the way it was spoken, and the mood of the audience in which it was spoken to. Today, I would like to discuss what had happened the day before he gave the speech on December 7th of 1941, the reactions of the President and the American citizens of the events that happened on December 7th, what was so special about the speech that Roosevelt gave that day, and the national and international effects of the speech that he gave. Now, when he gave the speech, what you have to keep in mind is that this was given at one of the worst times in American history. What had happened was, an Imperial Japanese Navy had launched a surprise attack on a Pearl Harbor Navy base. And during that attack, 2,400 Americans were killed, and another 1,000 were injured. And as expected, America falls into a huge panic. Less than 24 hours later, President Roosevelt gets up on a podium in Washington, D.C., stands in front of Congress, and is broadcasted nationwide on the radio and delivers his famous A Day That Will Live in Infamy speech. And 81% of Americans tuned into this on the radio. Now, what was so great about the speech? A couple things that were so great was it was short and sweet. The speech itself lasted no longer than 7 minutes, which gave him just enough time to get up there, explain what had happened, and get back down. He left most emotion out of his voice at all. He wasn't happy, upset, angry, none of that. He pretty much let the actions speak for themselves. And after he gave his speech, it was pretty clear to America that going to war was now a must. Going through a deeper analysis of the speech, start at the beginning. The label infamy itself just foreshadows the tone of the speech, and just lets us show that it's going to be remembered forever, and it's going to be remembered in a very, very bad way from what happened that day. And as I said, he didn't use very much emotion in his voice. Instead of using that, he used emotion through his words. He used words such as the Japanese launched a surprise offensive against American people, or how their actions were unprovoked and dastardly. Another quote that he said during that was very extremely powerful was that hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. Another thing that I thought he did very well in the speech was he gave good pauses, and he had a very consistent, bold, assertive voice throughout the entire length of the speech. Now, effects of President Roosevelt's speech. America enters World War II. Also, the American isolation movement was dispersed after the speech. And finally, the massive increase in American soldiers signing up for the military. My first point is that America enters World War II. 1 hour after Roosevelt gave his speech asking Congress to agree to go to war, there was a vote given. The present members of the House of Representatives and the Senate voted 470 to 1 to go to war. So America went to war. They joined the Allies, which were countries such as Poland, China, the UK, and the Soviet Union. And they fought against the Axis. The two major powers in the Axis were the Germans and the Japanese. After they decided to join the war, Roosevelt was quoted in saying, "This is the final destruction of the Nazi tyranny." My second point is that the American isolation movement dispersed. The American isolation movement was a movement created by the citizens of America to try to keep America out of World War II. Before the attacks of Pearl Harbor and President Roosevelt gave his speech, it was getting stronger and stronger every day. More Americans believed we should just stay out of it, try to stay isolated from the other countries. The day of December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor attacks happened, and President Roosevelt gave a speech. After that, the entire movement fell apart. Everybody agreed we should go to war. Finally, the influx of American soldiers. H. Roe Bartle was a former mayor of Kansas City at the time, and was quoted in saying, "Hardly any man was ever seen out of uniform at this time." Recruitment centers were open 24/7, allowing soldiers to sign up at any time, and soldiers would be in their uniform while they went to church, when they went shopping. They would be serving their country at all times while still doing their normal everyday things, activities. In conclusion, Pearl Harbor was probably the most tragic day in American history. And the events that happened that day in Pearl Harbor and the infamous speech that Roosevelt gave the day after helped persuade America to join World War II. Again, this speech was probably one of the greatest speeches given in the 20th century and has been used for guidelines for future speeches, such as the speech that was given after 9/11 and the speech that Obama gave after Osama bin Laden was killed. Some of the effects that happened after the speech was that America joined World War II. There was a giant increase in young American soldiers joining the American military. And what I think is most important is how united America felt after this tragic day. Roosevelt made it seem as though we were still all one team, one country, and we had to do this for the good of ourselves. So, is there any questions?
Do you know who his speechwriter was, who wrote that speech?
Roosevelt was actually the author of the speech. However, the Secretary of State at the time did help revise it to make it more understandable to the people of America.
Who was the person that voted against going to war?
In the 470 to 1 vote on whether or not to go to war, the one person that stood aside from the rest of the Congress was Jeannette Rankin, who was a Republican from Montana, and she was a well-known pacifist, so it really didn't come as a surprise to anybody that she voted against to go to join World War II. Any other questions? All right, I'm Dan Clark, and thank you for your time.